Good evening. Good evening. This is Wednesday, as usual. This is the Dialogues of the Web. We have three journalists with us tonight because amidst the health crisis of COVID-19, amidst the pandemic, the main subject today is journalism and information. Before I present our journalists, let me say that the discussion will be very interesting because we all depend on so many sources of information these times. There's so much that we do not know. There's so much happening around concerning the coronavirus. The implications are so widespread. So, the more we stay at home, those who stay at home, that is, and who are not obliged to be out there working, try to get as much information as possible in order to better understand and forecast the day after. Well, the day after is next week, as we know, for Greece at least, as this is the first phase of the easing of restrictions. Let me remind you how you can get in touch with us. Those who attend over the Greek channel or the international channel, dialogues are broadcast for the 29th time since we started. We broadcast all over the world, so welcome from wherever you may joining today. So I hope you are online, dialogues.snf.org. This is our URL. You can listen to either Greek or English. And of course we are broadcasting through our Facebook channel on Facebook. Questions, you can use our platform snf.org/dialogues, or you can connect with our profiles on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, of course. SNF Dialogues at dialogues.snf.org. Ioanna Soufleri is with us tonight. Thank you very much, Ioanna, for being with us. Doctor of Molecular Biology, Chief Editor of Tovima Science. This is important. This is a very interesting feature of today's debate. The value of a journalist who is also a specialist, especially on such an important and specialized subject such as COVID-19. So this is a specialized journalist. This is what we need. We need to heed the advice of experts. So before we transmit any information, let's first try to understand what we hear so that we can forward reliable information and not just anything. We also have Tassos Teloglou with us tonight. Thank you, Tassos, for being with us tonight. Again, in fact, Tassos is a journalist, of course, an investigative journalist, long history in investigative journalism. He is well known to all of us. But once again, he went deep into the subject. He has carried out a lot of research in the pandemic. Tassos, I know you have spent so many hours in hospitals, you have talked to specialists and medical doctors, etc. And if I may borrow one of your phrases, you have been becoming a specialist to some extent after talking to specialists all this time. You had to carry out research with international organizations, bibliography, etc. What is important here is judgment. Judgment in reading and understanding information. We need to understand who is the real specialist, who is the real expert. This is vital when it comes to a health crisis, because even headlines sometimes are wrong. And then we also have Thanasis Troboukis with us. Thank you very much, Thanasis, Project Manager of IMED Lab. we're going to discuss data, the importance of data, and especially specialized data. Data that the layman or the laywoman like me do not understand as isolated data. But data analysis is here to help us so that we convert all this to knowledge. Knowledge that can help us shape the global, the complete picture. It seems that we all miss a big part of the big picture concerning the coronavirus. And this is admitted by politicians, the laymen, medical doctors, everyone. It is an unknown virus, a new coronavirus, to be more specific. And here, journalists and medical doctors are trying to understand, to learn and understand. This is a very challenging subject. We should tread carefully because it is related to our livelihoods. Before we carry on, let us watch the following short video from social media. That's where we found it. We all use social media these days, apart from the news, of course. And then there is a lot of humor and satire around, created by the man in the street or even sometimes the specialist. But all this is derived from our daily lot. And sometimes when we stop laughing, we start thinking about reality. Let's watch the video first.
Yeah, I really don't understand why everybody isn't following the same rules right now. They're very clear. So let's take a minute and let's go over them again. First, you must not leave the house for any reason. Unless, of course, you have a reason, and then you may leave the house. All stores are closed except those that are open. And all stores must close unless, of course, they need to stay open. This virus is deadly, but don't be afraid of it. It can only kill people who are vulnerable and also those who are not vulnerable. We should stay locked down until the virus stops infecting people. And it will only stop infecting people if enough of us get infected that we build immunity. So it is very important that we get infected and also do not get infected. You should not go to the doctor's office or the hospital unless you have to go there. Unless, of course, you are too sick to go there. This virus has no effect on children except for those children in which it affects. The virus remains active on different surfaces for 2 hours, or 4 hours, or 6 hours, but in most cases it's days and not hours, and it needs a damp environment, or a cold environment that is warm and dry in the air, unless the air is plastic. Schools are closed, so you need to homeschool your children unless you can send them to school because you are not home. If you are at home, you can school your children using various portals and online classrooms unless you have poor internet, more than one child, only one computer, or you are working from home. Masks are useless at protecting you against the virus, but you still need to wear one because it can save lives. And in some cases, it may even be mandatory, but also maybe not.
You get the idea. This is our daily lot, you know. And these are the dilemmas. What should we do? What should we not do? What is your first comment? What is your take on all this? Telugu. I think this lady is from Canada, if I'm not mistaken. I had seen this video. This has 2.5 million views, says Ms. Pusduku. What we should all do, really. Telugu. Well, many of these contradictions that are funny, we have experience in our everyday life in trying to combat the epidemic. Well, all these are related to what can realistically be done at the time a measure is decided. If we don't have masks, we cannot say to people, wear masks. If you cannot afford buying tests, what can you say? Take the test. So we have to be realistic in all cases. This is one of the explanations. Well, this is work in progress, so to speak, in the sense that knowledge a month ago has changed in the meantime. And yes, of course, when you don't have masks, you cannot tell people to wear masks. But this video, in my personal opinion, describes precisely the term infodemic, information that confuses people at the end of the day rather than help them to cope. Teleglu, one comment, masks, to stick to masks, is of concern to all of us, of course. Mr. Tsiodras, Professor Tsiodras, had said that the general population should not wear masks. However, the general population, the community, used to wear masks, which means that the general population decided for themselves something different. The question is, did they wear the right masks? This is the first question. Some masks at the supermarket, in the first phase at least, were so sophisticated that you could not find in hospitals. This is a real issue, and it bothered me, I must say. The medical staff did not have sophisticated masks, and because these masks had been bought by the man in the street to wear in the supermarket. So high protection masks were not available in hospitals, and they could be found in supermarkets. It was a problem. Thanasis said it, and the specialists said the same. Take a piece of cloth and use it in front of your mouth. I think this would be closer to reality.
Have you ever worn a mask? And I'm talking about protection measures, be they masks, gloves, antiseptics, to the extent that one can find these alcohol-based hand sanitizers. So I spent 2 weeks at home close to confirmed cases, and I was asymptomatic. So the first time I went out, and I went to the supermarket, where else? And I must say that I set the alarm clock at 6, and I went to the supermarket at 7, believing that everything was clean and sanitized, and I didn't wear a mask then, because I knew that I could not transmit the virus. So you wear the mask if you are pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic. What I'd like to say about masks is that I have the impression that people wear them to protect themselves, and they make things worse because they wear them. I remember this lady in the supermarket, and she was touching the mask all the time. She was actually touching it, and it's difficult to get used to wearing the mask. It makes you feel uncomfortable, and if you wear glasses, your glasses get misty and you can't see, and it would have been better if this lady hadn't worn the mask at all. So what Mr. Tsiodras says, and he said it today, is that there will be instructions that will come out soon, and we will know how to wear the masks and how to use the mask. Well, I think that this is very important. And it's worse to wear it incorrectly and not know how to wear it and use it properly. The same goes for gloves. The same goes for gloves. People wear gloves and then you see them touching their hair and their face, and this is totally wrong. When you wear a mask and a glove, you sometimes have the feeling, and this is a wrong feeling, that you're protected, whereas you're not really protected. But we have this deluge of information. We're being bombarded with all this information. So people get confused at times. So the feeling now, the feeling that you have as journalists, but also as observers and as people who just watch what's happening. And I'm talking about the flow of information and everything that we listen to, and the frequency of the news that comes our way. So my question is the following: are you satisfied? Are you amongst those who are satisfied with the quality of information that we have received so far during this pandemic, that is? Well, I think that it all depends on the source of your information, on where you source the information from. And I am not out there like Tassos, for example. He's a soldier. He goes out and does the reporting, and he has to find all this information. So I might not be the best person to answer this question. Now, sources of information. We, as scientists, read scientific journals, and everything is available online as well, these scientific journals. As far as SARS and COVID-19 is concerned, everything is transparent. It's open access. You don't need to have subscriptions. You don't need to be a subscriber. So you have free access to these scientific journals. I'm really happy to be able to have access to all this, whereas in the past this was not the case. I am not a subscriber to all these scientific journals. That's one thing. But maybe Tassos and Thanasis have a different view on the flow of information in the midst of the pandemic. Tassos. Well, the pandemic is something that has affected the entire globe. There is no national source of information, and this is a good thing because you switch on your computer in the morning and you hear Drosten in Berlin. Drosten is the counterpart of Theodras in Germany, and he had a podcast every day on the radio of Germany. It's the national radio station, but now he only does it a couple of times a week, not every day. He got tired, and there he described what happened in the previous days, but he also showed lots of papers, and he explained how to read these papers, and that was very interesting because I found this fascinating. And you can also, for example, read in Lancet an article from people in Hong Kong, and if you're lucky, you can write them an email because everybody's online, and they might even be able to answer right away because everybody's online. That's a good thing. So you might be lucky in that sense. Now that we have this transition, if you like, because we're in transition, our editor-in-chief in special reporter Janine Luludi wrote to Professor Cowling in Hong Kong, who wrote one of the best papers on this transition from lockdown to the day after. And Koning answered, and we were quite fortunate. And he actually was able to offer us an interview, a half-hour interview. Well, under normal circumstances, this would not have been possible. And it's good for us to stop only thinking about Europe. Europe really knows nothing about us. A couple of months ago, they didn't know anything about masks. They didn't know anything about gloves. In Europe, this all came from the East because they had dealt with MERS and SARS, so they had experience on such matters. A lot of things regarding prevention or non-pharmaceutical way of dealing with things. For example, quarantines. In Europe, we'd forgotten about quarantine, but in Hong Kong, they actually make you go to one place first, and then you can actually go to your apartment after they have actually isolated you or put you in quarantine. And we know what a lot of people have copied what Korea does, and the Germans actually copied the Koreans, and there was one German expert who did test center drive-ins. This is something that was copied by the Europeans from the East. So you have to look at the non-European aspect in order to learn more, not just look at what's being done in Europe. Now, in relation to the information we receive, a couple of days ago, I saw that our mortality rate in Greece is 5.7%, whereas generally speaking, we've done well. This means that we have a problem with a denominator, i.e. our denominator, since we have comparatively fewer deaths than elsewhere, this means that the real cases are underreported, as we would say in English. Meaning we don't know how many people have been infected, how many people got infected with the virus. And this has to do with the diagnosis, meaning our diagnosis is not that great. It's not done at regular intervals. Well, excuse me for barging in, Ioanna Souffleri says. I don't think this is the right word. It's not that they're not done regularly. They're done systematically around people who actually have been infected and their contacts, people who come into contact with them. When I say irregular, let me just cite an example that I know personally. In the private labs where they did the tests, the positive cases, i.e. those who were found to be infected, were reported. The negative ones were not reported. They were not sent to the National Health Organization known as the OD in the Excel sheet. Well, you may say this doesn't have to do with the number of cases that have been reported, but it actually gives you a wrong, if you like, picture, because you don't know how many tests were done in total, how many came out positive and how many came out negative. So you know number of samples, but you don't know number of people, number of individuals. So we know how many samples have been tested, over 70,000 in total, but we don't know how many people have been screened, meaning how many people these samples were taken from. So now another question, who's being tested? Are these tests done on people who arrive in hospital as suspects? We know that this is actually what we hear. For example, Mr. Tsiodras talks about the tests that turned out positive, and we're talking about tests from people that showed up in hospital. Now, when you said irregular, if we actually extrapolate the number of tests to the general population, we know that Greece is not doing so well. But if we extrapolate the tests to the number of close contacts, our country is quite high, because what we try to do, and it's a matter of common sense, I cannot actually test everybody I would like to test. And let me say that this was not just something that we only saw in Greece, for example. There were no reagents in other countries. For example, we saw that this was a huge problem elsewhere, not just in Greece. So they decided in Greece to check the close contacts to people who have been confirmed as coronavirus positive. And I think that we see that R0 dropped, and this is one of the reasons. When I say R0, I mean transmissibility. So I'd like to say that those who were more at risk were those that were tested. That's the important thing. Thanasis Troboukis, I believe that close contacts, they were not all tested. They were placed in quarantine. I think that's the case. And the fact that we don't know how many have been tested in total, that is an issue. That is true. Well, Tassos Seloglu says there are two phases. I know this because I've seen certain cases which I sent to the authorities, so to speak. There are two phases. First phase, the AOD, the National Health Organization, was on its own. And when you hear AOD, the National Health Organization, you're thinking of something big. No, it's only 20 people. They're the ones that do all the work. So there, Ioanna is quite right. Even though they were trying to do the tracing, it wasn't enough. They couldn't do enough. And then we had Chardalia's service, civil protection. There were more officials, 110 people. So the pool of people who could do the tracing grew significantly. And we saw that it coincided with a time shift of 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks. Suddenly, instead of sending you at home, this changed. And they started testing. Let me just cite an example. There was a ship called Venizelos, and everybody on board was taken away. And there was somebody at the airport who actually came from Iskla. That's the ski resort in Austria. And from there, we saw that the virus spread rapidly. He was a driver, and he was on a bus, for example, with people coming back from Austria. In the beginning, he was not tested because that was the first phase. But later on, we saw that 5 days later, everybody coming to Venizelos airport, well, they were tested, or they were taken to 2 hotels, and there they were tested. So you have to see what happened when, because I agree with Thanasis, till the large quarantine starting on the 22nd of March. Well, prior to that, this wasn't the case, meaning 15th of March, this wasn't the case. But on the 22nd onwards, everybody coming to the airport was tested.
What is important here is the following. Of course, the whole thing happened in waves, in consecutive phases. Things change by the week, these last weeks. So we have a question of management by the state. Europe reacted in very different ways. We have a Europe of different speeds. The US are a different speed. Tassos described how knowledge reaches us. So some of the questions are related to how do we receive information about the virus, we, the community. I can see questions coming in from those who are connected. One of the questions is, how can the man in the street, the layman, distinguish truth from misinformation? Well, this is the million or billion-dollar question. Do you want to try to answer this? Tassos, you know TV very well. You were conducting a special report on antenna, and I know that during these last months you have spent weeks and months in hospitals, reference hospitals, so you may be best prepared to try to answer this, distinguishing that is truth from misinformation. Well, first of all, don't forget, we're not, well, actually, scientists, experts are not really familiar with the characteristics of the virus. We know a few things about the virus, the small projections of the virus, the spikes. We know a few things, yes, but we do not know enough. There are many things that we do not know. We do not know how the virus behaves in different species. The virus was mutated to reach man. That's why we say that life is full of surprises. So even the scientists are not ready to cope with the virus. They're still experimenting on the basis of previous viruses with medication that was not completely effective, medication that did not make progress because the pharmaceutical companies were not that interested, etc. Now, it seems that in the US we have 41 molecular tests and about 100 antibody tests just in the US. Most of them are useless. So the question from our viewer, I don't know if it can be answered. It is difficult, admittedly, to distinguish between the truth and misinformation. And as I said, even for the specialists, maybe I should give the floor to Ioanna to follow this up. But, you know, those who were treated effectively were cured for a series of reasons that might be hereditary, maybe there was no underlying disease, etc., etc. Or they went to the hospital earlier than others. They took the right care at the right time. Because in some cases, I cannot exclude that. Maybe some people were not treated properly, were not administered the proper care. So you cannot just make a decision on the basis of the information you get from TV about the right medication or the right treatment. Ioanna, yes, it's your turn. But before that, Tassos, I was wondering, the scientific community is still experimenting, as you said. We are waiting for the scientific community to tell us something that makes sense. In the meantime, journalists must exercise judgment in what information they transmit. And this brings me to the responsibility of journalists. Journalists should be able to embrace the message of an expert. There are journalists who then embrace the message and identify with this or that view, and they try to disseminate. And it's not good that they don't have the slightest doubt about what they broadcast. I don't know if you agree with that. Souffleri. Well, this is about the code of conduct of journalists. Well, at this point in time, there is a difficulty indeed, and let me open a parenthesis here. What you just said about journalists identifying with view A or B, this is up to the journalist. Sometimes I get angry with political editors, because they identify so much really with view A or B in a fanatical way. But this is a different cup of tea. Now, there are some certainties today, even today, but there are many uncertainties. Everything is work in progress. We keep learning by the day. So, my general comment on the virus would be this. We know much more today than what we knew in January, beginning of January. What we still do not know is this, and this is what I would like to know. How can the virus cheat the immune system, if you will? We know how it opens up our cells, how it multiplies, etc. We know these stages, and of course each stage can be a target for medication. However, the problem is that our immune system does not react to the desired degree, and this is, in my opinion, the problem. I'm saying this because a number of patients with not so many symptoms, without serious symptoms, have a minimum number of antibodies. So the fact that the antibodies are there, it seems, is not enough. And suddenly the virus is in our lungs, we experience thrombosis, and we die. So if I were to decide about the therapeutic target, this is where I would target research at this point in time. Troubokis. What you're describing is great knowledge, but do you happen to read nonsense in the press concerning the infection? Do you believe that the quality of information is adequate in Greece, at least? Souffleri, I don't know, excuse my ignorance, but I don't have the time to read everything. Anna said, I wake up in the morning and I follow Johns Hopkins, etc., the number of deaths, etc., and then I continue with international and Greek media. What I can say is that the colleagues at the ministry are very good in transmitting the position of the ministry. But concerning Greek media, I don't know, and I'm not a Facebook person. colleagues and friends will tell me about some conspiracy theories, etc., but I don't have the time to deal with that. Sorry to interrupt you on what Ioanna was just discussing. We have more questions. Let's see, what do people think about the quality of information? Where do they seek information? What are their sources? In these last 1.5 or 2 months, since COVID-19 became a real issue in Greece. There has been some research that started a few days before the official lockdown in Greece by the Aristotle University. This is the Laboratory of Investigative Journalism. They were kind enough to send us some of the results. Could we please see the results of this research? Because this involves people, the man in the street. Let's watch this.
Η έρευνα πραγματοποιήθηκε από το Εργαστήριο Ειρηνευτικής Δημοσιογραφίας, Τμήμα Δημοσιογραφίας και ΜΜΕ του Αριστοτελείου Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλονίκης και την Erax Analytics. Από τον καθηγητή κ. Φράγκο Νικολόπουλο, αναπληρωτή καθηγητή κ. Παναγιώτου, ερευνητές κ. Νικέζης, κ. Μπάλιου, κ. Μάρκου και από την Erax Analytics τον κ. Λαλάτση και την κ. Μαραντίδου. Είναι η πρώτη που καταγράφει τη σχέση του κοινού με τα ΜΜΕ και ειδικά με την ενημέρωση τόσο πριν την κρίση, αλλά ειδικά σε 2 φάσεις κατά τη διάρκεια της κρίσης. Ο χρόνος που αφιερώνει το κοινό κατά την πρώτη φάση της κρίσης έχει αυξηθεί σημαντικά σε σχέση με το αντίστοιχο πριν. Ωστόσο, ο χρόνος αυτός μειώνεται στη δεύτερη φάση, του Απριλίου, και σταθεροποιείται σε ποσοστά μεγαλύτερα από ό,τι πριν, αλλά όχι τόσο μεγάλο αρχικά, μεταξύ 1 και 2 ώρες τη μέρα. Στην ενημέρωση κυριαρχούν από τα μέσα οι ενημερωτικές ιστοσελίδες με 66% και η τηλεόραση 57%, η οποία είναι η κύρια επιλογή, καθώς σχεδόν διπλασιάζεται ο αριθμός αυτών που ενημερώνονται μέσω τηλεόρασης σε σχέση με πριν την κρίση. Σε ό,τι αφορά την κάλυψη της κρίσης, η δεύτερη περίοδο διαφαίνεται πρώτον το φαινόμενο της υπερπληροφόρησης και δεύτερον η διαφωνία σημαντικού μέρους του κοινού με τον τρόπο κάλυψης του θέματος, καθώς 40% όσων αποφεύγουν να ενημερώνονται πλέον δηλώνουν αυτό ως αίτιο. Έχει αυξηθεί σε έναν βαθμό η εμπιστοσύνη προς τα ΜΜΕ σε σχέση με ό,τι έχει παρατηρηθεί πριν την κρίση, καθώς 36% δηλώνει αρκετά, ενώ πριν την κρίση το ποσοστό αυτό σε άλλες έρευνες ήταν στο 22%. Ο βαθμός εμπιστοσύνης αυξάνει προς το ραδιόφωνο 2,36 και τον τύπο 2,23, ενώ πολύ ψηλός είναι και για τις ενημερωτικές ιστοσελίδες 2,67, όλα με άριστα το 5. Το πρόβλημα της παραπληροφόρησης είναι πολύ ψηλό. Ειδικά την πρώτη περίοδο, το 62% δηλώνει ότι έχουν επηρεαστεί από κάποια ψευδή είδηση, ενώ στη δεύτερη περίοδο το αντίστοιχο ποσοστό είναι 50%. Το εντυπωσιακό έβριμα είναι ότι το 37% δηλώνει ότι δεν έκανε κάτι στην περίπτωση αυτή. Μάλιστα, τα υψηλότερα ποσοστά όσων δηλώνουν δεν έκαναν κάτι, 55%, είναι εις ηλικίες 25-34. Το 39% ενημέρωσε φίλους και γνωστούς, 27% κατέβασε ή έστειλε την ανάρτησή του, 21% έκανε ανάρτηση ότι η είδηση ήταν ψευδής και 11% έστειλε μήνυμα στο μέσο για να τους ενημερώσει. Πολύ υψηλό είναι το ενδιαφέρον για πληροφόρηση από επιστημονικές πηγές, καθώς το 77% και το 80% στη δεύτερη φάση δηλώνουν ότι σε επιλέγουν για την πληροφόρησή τους σχετικά με τα θέματα αυτά. Το έβριμα αυτό υποδηλώνει μια νέα κατεύθυνση για τα ΜΜΕ σε σχέση με θέματα υγείας, επιστημονική δημοσιογραφία, πηγές κλπ.
So I think that a lot of interesting things were mentioned. I'd like to dwell on a couple, but Ioanna described a few things, all right. But Tassos, we're talking about our everyday lives now. What is the first thing you do in the morning? Meaning, where will you go get information first to see what's happened and how things have evolved in relation to the coronavirus? Not just in Greece, but globally. It depends on the phase. In the first weeks of March, for example, I used to phone all the directors of clinics. I used to pick up the phone and call the directors of these clinics. And then I realized that they do the same more or less. There were protocols in place and they followed the protocols. There was an Ebola drug. I'm not going to give you the name of the pharmaceutical. It hadn't received approval. And in order for you to use this against the coronavirus, your patient had to be in intensive care in the ICU. This was a necessary precondition in order for you to get onto the platform and get approval from the US. So Patras, for example, that had some people from that bus I told you, was able to get this authorization and made use of this drug in the month of March, whereas Larissa, in the case of Mr. Keller, the MP, well, they weren't able to use it on this MP, on the Member of Parliament. They used something else instead. So those were the sources back then. Everything was very primitive by way of technology, but I wanted to see what was happening in the different clinics, private clinics. And remember what happened in Italy back then. They were already in lockdown, and we were fighting not to end up like Italy. And we really wanted to see what was happening in the different clinics. Then, slowly, they understood that this was not enough. It wasn't sufficient. I understood that it wasn't enough. So then I started reading Chinese papers in Lancet or in other scientific journals that were in English. And there were many published in Hong Kong, many papers, many studies. But these were preliminary studies. They were not the definitive papers. It's what Ioanna talked about. She talked about the speed at which things were happening. For example, there was no peer review in some publications at first. So this means that they were low value, says Thanasis. Ioanna, no, not necessarily, but it's good for you to have been peer reviewed, because here there may be mistakes in statistics, for example. So these non-peer reviewed papers are not useless, but you actually take it with a grain of salt. So then we saw that other European countries got involved, Germany, the UK, when the UK abandoned the herd immunity concept, and then they started looking into other things as well. We wanted to see what was happening in these countries. And of course, what is important right now is that we have good Greek doctors in almost all European hospitals. Yes, you're quite right about that. So we're talking about large European hospitals where they're good Greek doctors. And it's easy. I can talk to them on social media. For example, I discovered Mr. Gerodiafas on Facebook. Gerodiafas is head of a hematology department in one of the biggest hospitals in Paris. And there was also this problem with the youngsters in London. And I called actually a lady working in the NHS, and she actually was head of a pediatric department. And she told me quickly what happened with a particular child or adolescent. So the world has become very small. You get the information. Okay, fine. But if you don't have the specialized knowledge, how can you evaluate? How can you assess that piece of information? So it's exactly what we see in this question. Is there a deficit of journalists able to understand and to transmit scientific content? Because we know that sometimes you have to be able to interpret the scientific data. Well, I think Ioanna is the only person who could answer that question. This is why we decided to invite Ioanna today, and we're lucky to have her with us. So any journalists watching us, I'd like to say that science journalism, which has become a trend, a fad abroad, and here we see that slowly have started making some tentative steps, and these are journalists out of their own volition, out of their own will, to try and see what this scientific journalism is all about. So here we understand why it's important for newsrooms to have journalists who understand and who can properly interpret the scientific data. Ioanna, you're one of the few, if not the only cases of people who are competent. Akis Galgadas, he's a physicist. He works in Vima Science. And we also have Panos Tsiboukis. He is a biologist and he works for Vima Science. And now he's being trained on journalism in France. He's studying science journalism. And Theodora Tsioli, who's in Vima Science and who doesn't have a scientific background, she has learned from experience. She's worked a lot and she has gained experience on the job. training, so to speak. So this has to do with the different schools of journalism as well. In Japan, you can't graduate from a school of journalism if you haven't passed your biology class and your chemistry class. So you have to have these skills. So I think that you need to have a solid basis in mathematics and physics. It helps you generally in life. I'm not saying that everybody should become a biologist, and I'm not saying that all biologists should end up becoming journalists. But I believe that for me, this was a great help. And it's also a decision by the media. Sorry to interrupt you, Anna says Thanasis. There are medical correspondents who know a lot about science. But when the medium talks about politics more than science, this is an issue by itself, on its own. I don't know, but I believe that sometimes it is the press that sometimes doesn't want to focus on scientific reporting. They talk more about the policy of health. And this is why we have correspondents who actually do a lot of reporting on the Ministry of Health. Sometimes they manage, sometimes they don't. But I think that we have moved in leaps and bounds. There have been great advances in that field in Greece. I came back to Greece after Andreas Papandreou spent a long time in Onasion, the cardiosurgery hospital, says Ioanna Soufleri, and I felt that correspondents who actually were outside Onasio, outside the ward where Andreas Papandreou was being hospitalized, well, I believe that they actually were half ignorant and stubborn. And when I heard them actually report, I got angry because they were acting as if they knew everything. They were smart Alex. But things have changed. I've seen a great improvement since then, a great improvement in reporting medical news. And this type of journalism, not just politics. Anna Kinthia Bouzdoukou. I just want to add to what you all said. Sorry, Ioanna, sorry to interrupt. I go back to the study we looked at, and this has got to do with what Thanasis mentioned previously and what you, Ioanna, said. We know there is a need for specialization, specialized knowledge, not just general knowledge. So journalists need to have specialized knowledge. And you said there has been improvement on that front, which means that the journalist world has understood that there is a need for that. But the question is whether the sector, whether the media, whether the press will do something about it and will take action. So here we see that things are pretty bad. We have this new reality. We have the pandemic. We're in the midst of a pandemic. But now an opportunity is being given. Why? Because people are again turning towards the media. A lot of people had turned their back on the press. There was a lack of trust. And this was terrible. And this is generally very dangerous when it comes to having a democracy. So we see that the people are again going towards the media and the press. There's also a change of role models in society in general. You see young children, for example, sitting to watch TV and Mr. Tsiodras at 6 o'clock when he makes his announcement about the coronavirus. This is something you wouldn't have seen prior to the pandemic. So we see that people want facts. They want facts and figures. If they wake up in the morning and they see what John Hopkins has announced. But we know that young children actually copy what their parents do. People tend to be mimics. Young people do what their parents do. That's true. Now, about the study that was actually published recently, there's a problem there, says Tassos Teloglu. People say that 65% get their information from the internet, but the We have free internet on the one hand, where there's copy-paste, and we also have subscription-only internet. Correct. Thanasis posted an article on Facebook 2 days ago. It took me 25-30 minutes to read his post, and then I sat and saw how many correspondents had participated, and I checked this and saw what happened in New York. This article was written by 25 correspondents working for New York Times. So this article is written by 25 reporters, and they got paid to do it. So isn't that the case? So you see, you pay what you get. The quality in reporting is a one-way street. It's a matter of life and death, a matter of survival. It doesn't only have to do with how we handled the pandemic. I think quality in journalism is the only way forward. There's no other way. And in Greece, given the financial difficulties the press is facing, I'm talking about newspapers and about TV channels as well. So your show is wonderful, Anna, but I think that everybody needs to have high quality information. And let me just cite an example. When in IMED we created an application to monitor the virus, the coronavirus, within a few hours we had over 150,000 people who wanted to learn more about COVID, and it spread. So we had over 2.5 million people in a month's time who wanted to look at all the statistics in relation to the coronavirus. So quality and investing in content is the only way forward. It's a cul-de-sac, a one-way street, and there's no other option. So I think that in the post-pandemic area, this will become the rule, i.e. we must be able to invest in articles like New Yorker and so on and so forth.
Thanasis, you've sent a few cards on the spread of the virus and the recordings that IMED has carried out. As the first non-profit journalist organization, well, you are a network of journalists, not just another media. Can we see the map? Let's start with the map of Greece and see the most recent data. Yes, this is the application IMED built at lab.imed.org/COVID-19. This is the geographical spread of deaths per prefecture. Mr. Childers announced 2,576 cases, plus 10. One more death, up to 139 total in Greece. In the world, we have more than 3 million cases and more than 219,000 deaths. The application also shows, in an automated way, but in a quality way, statistical analysis. You will see all the data available in Greece. By clicking on statistics, you can compare the course of Greece compared to other countries. You can follow the state of play and the progress over time. This is very interesting now. It will be interesting also in the future, because we are now close to the end of the first phase, but there will be several other phases. People are interested. This is my conclusion, and this is reflected in the interest of the interest of people in the application, which has been embedded in various apps and media. Well, we have worked together on this material. Of course, the real work has been done by the lab of IMED and the statisticians and the analysts. But what I mean is that we need more effective statistics analysis in general. in Greece and elsewhere. But for those who believe in data and their analysis, one could say that amidst the pandemic, amidst the crisis, where things change by the minute or the hour, we could give some simple, essential instructions to people in order to appease them, to help them adopt a more composed approach. What I'm saying is that if we give even more information, maybe we achieve the opposite result. And this is what I also hear from the expert. Souffleri, I totally disagree. I totally disagree. Teleglu. More analytical data will not lead to panic. Let me give you an example. The ICU units were occupied up to 41% only. I think 41 was the maximum, okay? We had started discussing this before the crisis. Thanasis is right. The number of patients in the ICUs was very important. There, of course, there are statistical issues. What happens to people who are removed from the ICU and then are reintegrated in the ICU? Thanasis, well, the best indicator is the number of people in the ICUs. I mean that the same patient may have been counted twice. Some people were transferred from the ICU to the ward and back. This person is counted twice. No, I'm referring to the total people hospitalized for COVID. This is the main number. And this information is not being provided in Greece. Hospitalized cases. What I was referring before is the number of people who were in the ward, then they were transferred to the ICU and back to the ward after improving. This information has been recorded, but not at all times. This is a statistics problem. This is a problem with hospital statistics. So the problem is not with the analyst, it's the problem with the people who collect this information. Because, our hospitals, well, many hospitals, have not learned to work, to operate in this way, that is, keeping reliable statistics. Troubokis. Doctors know epidemiology, they know how to collect data. It is also up to the state to make a decision to keep proper statistics. Take COVID, okay? It takes a decision first to collect data and then forward them, making them available to the journalists. This will give us the full picture. Now, unfortunately, we are waiting from just one scientist, one expert to tell us how we fare. Ideally, we should have several sources of information. And thank God, we are coping very well. But what if we did not? Bouzdougou. Yes, it's about full information. The journalists have to fight for information, but they must first be granted access to information, to national data and other data. And let me read this question. There are continuous changes concerning instructions to the citizens. The same applies to the vaccine. They're talking about the vaccine in autumn while we know we need 5 years. What is the truth? Well, all those who say that we'll have vaccine in autumn have no clue about what is a vaccine. I don't think there is any serious scientist who claims that we will have the vaccine in autumn. Even if we had a vaccine ready to be tested now, trials take place like this. First of all, we confirm the safety of the vaccine. This is phase 1. Then phase 2 and phase 3 are I vaccine thousands of people and I split them into groups. The first group is vaccine with the real vaccine, and the others with a placebo. And I allow these people to go around in the community, and I measure those who became cases, and I compare the two groups. This is the ethical way to check the validity of a vaccine. That's why the production of a vaccine takes up to 5 years or more. Now, there is a huge movement of volunteers mobilized by people who now say, yes, try the vaccine on me. I want to accelerate the procedure. Yes, please do vaccinate me, and then I'm ready to contract the virus to check whether the vaccine is effective. Well, I don't know if this movement will survive. Is this ethical? I don't know. Will the whole thing follow this process? I don't know. I understand that older people may be more vulnerable, but even younger people are not 100% immune. You know, we have young people who died because of the virus. And this brings us back to what we were saying in the beginning. We do not know enough things about the virus and our immune system. What allows about 40% of people to cope with the virus, almost asymptomatic? And what happens with the remaining 60%? Why can the virus destroy the epithelium in our lungs? And why do some young, healthy people overreact and suddenly die? Not because of the virus, but because of the reaction of their immune system to the virus. So as long as all these questions remain unanswered, I'm afraid we will not have a vaccine. And this is the right thing to do. I don't want to see a vaccine administered to so many people, a vaccine that will kill more people than the virus will. We don't want that. So I'd rather wait for the vaccine, if you ask me, provided it is a safe vaccine. So I'm not holding my breath. Maybe the treatment will come up earlier and hopefully effective. I'm sorry, I don't have good news, but certainly don't hold your breath. There will be no vaccine in autumn. You'll be disappointed.
So I've been listening very attentively what you just said and what you just repeated, Joanna, and we hear a lot about the vaccine. There's a lot of talk about it all over the world. And now I'd like to say that journalists, colleagues of ours, from the sector, meaning they can be working in traditional media, for example, TV, radio, newspapers, websites, or colleagues who are freelancing or who could work as correspondents for international press agencies. However, they all fall under the umbrella term of journalists. So we asked them, the IMED asked them, because it works not as a closed space, but as a network of journalists who are also based in Greece, amongst other places in the world. So we asked them to send from their home, and we asked them to use their camera and answer the question. If they had the possibility to ask a question, what question would that be? And what concerns them the most regarding the pandemic as journalists? I think it's worth watching what they had to say, not because we have the answers, but I think that we need to ask as many questions as possible in order to have all this in the back of our head in the future when we start receiving all this information.
Για την πανδημία μαθαίνουμε βήμα-βήμα την πορεία των επιστημονικών ευρημάτων. δεν έχει απαντηθεί το βασικό ερώτημα. Πώς ξεκίνησε και πότε θα τελειώσει.
Γιατί χρειάστηκαν τόσο σκληρά μέτρα στην καθημερινότητά μας και ένα παγκόσμιο lockdown στην οικονομία, προκειμένου να αντιμετωπιστεί αυτή η ασθένεια, με αποτέλεσμα να μένει χώρος να αναπτύσσονται θεωρίες συνωμοσίας ακόμη και σε mainstream media.
Κατά πόσο υπάρχουν μέθοδοι εποπτείας τέτοιοι, ώστε να μπορέσουν να προβλέψουν την επόμενη πανδημία και έτσι να αντιμετωπιστεί πιο άμεσα πριν εξαπλωθεί.
Πόσο θα διαρκέσει και ποιο θα είναι το κόστος για όλο αυτό. Τι πρέπει να θυσιάσουμε για να συνεχίσουμε να ζούμε.
Πότε ξανανοίγει και ποιος. Τα μαγαζιά και ποιου μεγέθους. Τα σχολεία, τα εστιατόρια, τα θέατρα. Και με τον τουρισμό τι γίνεται. Τι χάθηκε.
Η κυβέρνηση λέει ότι χρειάζονται 1 εκατομμύριο τεστ ώστε να βγούμε στην επόμενη μέρα χωρίς μέτρα. Όμως δεν έχει απαντηθεί πώς θα αποκτηθούν αυτά και κυρίως σε τι χρονικό διάστημα.
Κατά πόσο πρέπει να χρησιμοποιούμε μάσκες και γάντια ή όχι.
Πώς η αποχή από διαγνωστικές εξετάσεις, καθώς και ο περιορισμός της ροής ασθενών από τα νοσοκομεία, θα επηρεάσει την πορεία της υγείας ανθρώπων που αντιμετωπίζουν άλλα χρόνια προβλήματα.
Ποιες είναι οι ψυχολογικές επιπτώσεις της πανδημίας σε παιδιά, εφήβους και οικογένειες χωρίς κανένα δίχτυ ασφαλείας.
Ποιος υποπτεύει, με τι κριτήρια και σε πόσο χρονικό διάστημα θα δοθούν οι δωρεές στο Εθνικό Σύστημα Υγείας.
Σίγουρα υπάρχει θολό τοπίο σε ό,τι έχει να κάνει με τα πρωτόκολλα του ΠΟΗ. Φάνηκε να είναι αγκυλωμένο σε αυτά. Γιατί δεν αξιολόγησε έγκαιρα τον κίνδυνο της τεράστιας διασποράς στην Ευρώπη, προτείνοντας άμεσα κλείσιμο των συνόρων.
A pandemic has been very much predicted, yet most governments seemed to be totally unprepared when it came. How come? I think journalists should scrutinize the policies that have prevented this preparedness.
Προσωπικά δεδομένα, ελευθερίες, δικαιώματα και ασφάλεια. Τι διακυβεύεται και τι θα είναι διαφορετικό στη μετά τον κορονοϊό εποχή.
Λόγω του COVID-19, πολλές κυβερνήσεις εφαρμόζουν νόμους που παραβιάζουν τα ανθρώπινα και πολιτικά δικαιώματα. Μετά το τέλος της πανδημίας, αυτοί οι νόμοι θα διατηρηθούν και κατά πόσο θα επηρεάσουν το επίπεδο της δημοκρατίας σε παγκόσμια κλίμακα.
Τι προηγούμενο δημιουργεί η επιλογή του κοινωνικού καλού versus των ατομικών ελευθεριών.
Κατά πόσο η πανδημία του κορονοϊού θα επηρεάσει το Green Deal και τις προσπάθειες να δομηθούν οι ευρωπαϊκές οικονομίες στις αρχές της πράσινης ανάπτυξης. Δηλαδή, θα πάμε πιο γρήγορα σε βιώσιμες οικονομίες ή όλο αυτό θα επηρεάσει αρνητικά το πέρασμα στην πράσινη ανάπτυξη.
First of all, let me thank all the colleagues who responded to our invitation. This was an idea that was rather spontaneous, meaning with the dialogues team, we were looking at various issues that we would like to look into more carefully. Now, at this time of the coronavirus pandemic, and we know that we now only work on an online environment, so we met with the IMED people. So we are together, but we're also separate, and we know that IMED is an organization that we have established. We're a journalistic team with working thanks to an exclusive donation by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. So we actually talked to these colleagues with whom we've been discussing matters, everybody from home. So we thought that we could put our heads together and come up with all these answers. So I'd like to thank them for accepting the invitation and for rising to the occasion, not because they wanted to appear on dialogues, but there are a lot of unanswered questions. I think that's what comes out of it. And we feel that some of these will remain unanswered, that they will not be answered. Ioanna, I don't think that anybody can answer such questions right now. And there's so many questions. There's such a wide range of questions right now. Thanasis, of course, it's good to pose the questions. That's the first thing. And then if we have posed the questions, we actually set the tone. Tassos, out of all the questions asked, I know that I couldn't answer some of them. I don't have the knowledge. But my favorite question was the one asked by the Norwegian colleague, Ingeborg. She said the governments knew there was a pandemic, but why did it take the government so long to respond? And I think that here we have the key to the success of Greece in this matter. Greece, and it's not that others say this, but our country didn't actually listen to the WHO and the WHO notifications. Ioanna, this is a working assumption. So I've discussed this with people who attended meetings in Copenhagen, for example, and they went to these meetings organized by the WHO. So when they came back from these meetings, some of the people who had been in the delegation said everybody is in a deep slumber. These people there are sleeping, they're fast asleep. I think that, first of all, they were trying to cover up the situation in China. Well, Greece is one of the European member states, and for many reasons, not just because of its state mechanism. I think that it is not because of its state mechanism, but it actually has good relations with many different segments of Chinese society. And I say this because a couple of weeks ago, Elpen, which is one of the biggest pharma companies, because of the notifications by its suppliers, stopped actually allowing people to work in its factory on the 10th of February, or rather, it didn't allow visitors to visit its factory as early as the 10th of February, because there are tycoons, there are ship owners, there are many channels of communication between Greece and China. Let's not forget how many how many supplies, medical supplies came to Greece, and this was not thanks to the government, but thanks to private individuals. These people had some information about what's going on in China, and maybe they learned all this before the WHO. So in the first announcement by the ECDC, based on the WHO notification, it says there is not enough evidence of human-to-human transmission. Ioanna says 15th of January. I heard that as well, and there was no other animal in the surrounding region. So I think this is something that is haunted, says Thanasis Troboukis, the WHO. Well, we see that I don't think. Sorry. A question for Tassos. Ioanna, please go ahead, says Anna Kinthia. I don't think it's only WHO that's to blame. I think that with SARS and MERS, we had thought that there are some Asian epidemics, whereas the theory in epidemiology says, wait, zoonoses will arise. Maybe not today, we don't know when, but one thing is certain, that there will be a zoonosis outbreak. And we know that we have a destruction of habitats, we have more people populating the earth. So this means that we have actually come into contact with animals that we had never come into contact with in the past. For example, why would a bat fly into an area inhabited by humans? So here we have this contact, a close contact between animals and humans. So we thought, okay, we didn't have the problem with MERS, we didn't have the problem with SARS, it was all in Asia. But you see, it came our way. And I think it's also got to do with the way we think of different things. And this has to do with the politics in the future. And what is done. Tassos Teloglu.
I remember Chernobyl. We learned about Chernobyl from Sweden, measuring high radioactivity. And in this case, we got the news about COVID through Taiwan, that is not a member of the WHO. And then the Chinese, a few days later, informed WHO. And this thanks to the Taiwanese who work in Wuhan. Well, we don't know exactly when the WHO received the information. We have to investigate this. Well, the Europeans did not take the whole thing seriously in the beginning. Some just did not want to take it seriously. Some others said, let's save the economy. This asks me this question. Well, some others were more concerned with the economy than health. Well, sometimes it's simply too late, and for the Europeans, at the end of the day, it was too late. That's why we had so many deaths. The Italians missed the opportunity. They wasted 1 month. They were waiting for the report. Then the Austrians cared more about winter sports, etc. This is a question for all three of you. We know now what is the prevailing view of the experts and in the media. Okay, we don't know enough about the virus, but we need the lockdown. We need to stay in for a certain period in order to protect ourselves. And there are, on the other hand, some voices, different voices, who exploit the situation. Sometimes these are scientists who say that the worst is to close down schools because the virus cannot provoke immunity. The question is still there. Who is right? And are we allowed as journalists to expose all views, even contradicting views? Soufleri, we should listen carefully. We should have our ears open. And I don't think anyone is really objective. Journalists or others, well, we have to exercise judgment at the end of the day, depending on our experiences. So let's start from scratch. Let's try to rationalize. What are we going through? This is a global experiment that will offer a huge amount of data for the future. This experiment cannot be guided without proper knowledge. I mean, it would be unthinkable to open schools because we have no certainty that things would be better with the schools open. What would we see? The grandchildren hugging the granny or the grandfather, etc. Where would that lead to? We could not allow this. So damage control, or allowing the least evil, was the approach that we opted for at the end of the day. Are we heading to herd immunity with a gradual opening of the economy now? What does that mean? We will reduce risk for people who participate in experiments. Well, herd immunity. This is the first thing I would like to discuss. In order to achieve herd immunity, we need 65 to 70% of the population to have antibodies in their bodies, and that these can annihilate the virus. We need quality antibodies, that is. And this cannot be achieved in a month or 1 month and a half. This is excluded. This would mean mass contraction of the virus, and this would be a disaster, a huge disaster, larger than Italy's. Concerning the second question, if more people participate in experimentation and whether this will accelerate progress, etc., I don't know. This is difficult to say. We have selected the volunteers, first of all, carefully. The volunteers are pre-selected. And this brings us to another question. What are the selection criteria of these volunteers? Georgios Babastathis is an MIT engineer. He works on models, using neural models that are trained. Well, models are trained with all the knowledge and the information and the data that you feed them with. So you cannot expect everything from models. You have to feed the models for models to produce knowledge. Yes, yes, we need data. We must feed models with data. Troboukis, this is the number one question here. All political decisions made all over the world are based on such mathematical forecasting models, machine learning, etc., etc. All governments, including the Greek one, must make public the models they use. This is of extreme urgency. Who uses what model, so that other scientists can scrutinize them and improve them. And then we will be able to prove to the layman that the decisions made are not political games, but decisions based on knowledge. So this is the number one issue, not just for me. All journalists realize the importance of making models publicly available to everyone. This is a question of transparency. And the same goes with the management of the economy. Yes, that was my next question. This is the other facet of the coin. Teloglu, that was a question to me, if I believe EOD data, the data provided by the National Health Organization. I said something about under-reporting. I raised this with a ministry official a month ago. I told him you cannot have 4% mortality, have lower mortality. So there is a problem with the denominator, which is the population the population of cases. And it was a small fight, and then Tsiodras, some days later, said that the real number of cases can be tenfold. Remember? But in their defense, I would say that there's no country in Europe, even Germany, who has a totally accurate picture. In a slaughterhouse in Germany, suddenly we found 200 cases, and then there were 150 cases in a senior home. You see, reality changes by the hour and the day. Maybe we have similar problems in industrial plants or in hospitals, etc. Take the case of Kranidi. Then the official of the ministry told me, you may be right concerning the number of cases, but the deaths cannot lie. So, what is the litmus test here? You know, Teloglu, this is a well-founded argument, you know. Now, conversely, someone who has Parkinson, has suffered from 3 strokes, etc. Suddenly, this death is considered as a COVID death. Souffleri. Yes, this is not a death because of the virus. It's a death with the virus. Troboukis. The Financial Times and other media compared deaths during the COVID era with the deaths previously. As Mr. Tsiodras said, we have the numbers, the sheer numbers, but we do not fully understand the reality yet. That is why, I will repeat this, we need more data, more models, so that we can objectively assess them. Teloglu, sorry to interrupt. Concerning tests, the question is about tests, says Ms. Pousdoukou. Let me ask the question, and then you can answer. Good evening. Why don't we discuss the absence of tests in Greece? In Britain, the plan is to carry out 100,000 tests per day. In Greece, we only carry out 1,500.
There's a lot of Discussion on lack of tests. That's not true. Maybe the discussion is all wrong regarding the deficit, the lack of tests. I know Germany a little bit better, and there they do a lot of tests. Why? Because a lot of private bodies have been given the green light, so they test. They've been certified, and they test as much as possible. They want to make money. And they get paid by the pension funds. Here there are two answers to this question. One is that we cannot certify them, and all those out there, all these private bodies, are not all okay. And there are other questions that can be posed. For example, I've heard Kostas Bariotas, the former MP, saying that there are some people working in the labs, and they don't want anybody else to do tests. They are staking their claim. If you look at the figures given by Skertsos yesterday regarding the reopening and going back to a situation that is more normal, we know that for the next period, we're talking about 38 tests a day. This is only PCR for the general population, outside not taking into account the closed populations and the antibody test. The question is, where are we going to find all these? But in order for us to get back to normal, the only way to go about it is by doing tests. I don't agree, says Joanna. Why should it be the only way forward? A negative test today doesn't mean that I will remain negative in the future. This is what I wanted to say, said Anna. This is a long discussion, but this is something that we're all concerned about. So, okay, if you have been tested, can it tell you what's going to happen in the future? Because you may do the test and you may be okay, and then you can go out and get infected. We all have to behave, Thanasi says, as if we were positive. If we pretend that we've been tested positive, that's good. And this is the way in order for us to avoid people transmitting the virus. We're all potentially positive when we go out into society. Ioanna, I'm very scared of people feeling fine because they've tested negative. People have to understand, and they have to be trained, that just because they turned out negative today doesn't mean that they will still be negative. And by the time you get the answer, you might already have been infected, because it takes a while for the results to come out. So even 2 days after the test was taken, I may have symptoms. I may manifest symptoms. And we saw this in certain cases, said Anna Kinthia. People have been tested negative in the first test, and then the test was repeated. And we are talking about confirmed cases. And here we see that whereas the first time they were negative, the second time they were positive. We see that there is a survey, an EU survey against misinformation, and it tried to tone down the findings regarding China. This made the US furious. Do you think how do you believe that information will play a role in this new post-COVID geopolitical landscape? Tassos, would you like to make a comment regarding this question? Would you like to say something? I'm not an expert on geopolitics. No, just tell us what you think. Well, the Chinese, the truth of the matter is they tried to put on this, if you like, disguise, and they tried to put on the charm, and they went to and did all these delegations, and we know that there was no mask leaving China if the Chinese foreign ministry hadn't given the green light. It was a type of soft power diplomacy, the Chinese and experts and all these this PPE to Europe. And then we had the official means controlled by the Chinese government that this is a virus that was created in the US. And we know that the Chinese government did not dispute this rumor when it was being spread in China. So we had such situations. And in Germany, there were German officials saying that the Chinese approached them and tried to convince them to write articles that were less critical of China in the beginning of the the pandemic, but wouldn't the countries of the West do the same if the pandemic had started from their countries, if the outbreak was in their country? So I think that all countries use diplomacy in order to reduce the negative consequences for themselves. I'm not certain that this is a situation which should lead to a greater confrontation and not more cooperation. I read the papers by the Chinese. Their papers, and I'm talking about what they've written so far. Of course, I don't have Ioanna Souffleri's background, but I learned a lot of things when reading these papers that were useful for Europe. And we see that Asians and Chinese have done things and they did them first. And I know that other peoples in Asia mistrust the Chinese more than Europeans. Maybe they know them better. Maybe that's why they so suspicious and not trusting. But I think we can learn some things from China. I think we can learn through cooperation. Now, next question. I would like to refer to the next dialogues. So this is a question from Facebook. What is your opinion on the recent statements by Schäuble, who actually said that immunity of the economy overrides herd immunity? And on the 13th of May, that's when we will meet again, the next event of dialogues. So in the post-COVID or in the period during the pandemic, we hold our meetings twice a month and not just once a month, because a lot of questions have come to mind due to the pandemic. So we meet twice a month instead of once a month. So I'd like to talk about the next event, 6:30 on a Wednesday, 13th of May, and we'll be talking about the economy. We'll be talking about the economy after the COVID-19 pandemic, how this has affected the relations between Europe, between China, between the US, and so on and so forth, and other countries. So before we move on to the next question, I would like to see the journalists that spoke to us before, and they sent us yet another video. And this is the question when we come back, before we conclude today. This will be a question to Tassos, Ioanna, and Thanasis. The question is, how do journalists, and I know that we have somewhat changed the terms, but normally speaking, the journalists are out there. They're not hunkering down in their homes. They go out, they see people, they chat to people, they investigate, and then they decide who they're going to interview, in what way, what they will report, what they will record, and so on and so forth. So together with all the other problems that we had as a sector, as journalists, let's see what's going on. What are the concerns regarding the profession of journalists? And this is the view of the journalists themselves. And we're not talking about the future, but also about the present and the past.
Σε μια περίοδο που η ανάγκη για έγκαιρη και έγκυρη ενημέρωση είναι πιο μεγάλη από ποτέ, ακούμε για εκπεριτροπής εργασία, για αναστολές συμβάσεων σε συναδέλφους, δημοσιογράφους και τεχνικούς που εργάζονται στα μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης, ενώ το εργασιακό μέλλον όλων μας είναι αβέβαιο μετά την καραντίνα.
Ένα μεγάλο ερωτηματικό επίσης τίθεται και για το μέλλον των εφημερίδων, όπου η κυκλοφορία τους έχει καταποντιστεί εξαιτίας της ύπαρξης των περιοριστικών μέτρων και το μεγάλο στοίχημα είναι αν θα υπάρχει επόμενη μέρα για αυτές.
Ποιοι και πώς θα επιβιώσουν, δεδομένου πως η ποιοτική δημοσιογραφία κοστίζει. Αυτό όμως που νιώθω επίσης πολύ καθαρά είναι και την ευθύνη των αναγνωστών. Γιατί η ενημέρωση δεν εξαρτάται μόνο από τα μέσα, αλλά και από τους αναγνώστες και τις επιλογές τους.
Εξαιτίας της κρίσης που προκάλεσε ο κορονοϊός, πολλά μίντια θα χάσουν από τα έσοδά τους και ενδέχεται στο μέλλον να πάρουν αποφάσεις που θα συνδέονται περισσότερο με την οικονομική επιβίωσή τους παρά με την ανεξαρτησία τους.
Πώς εκτιμάτε, πώς αποτιμάτε και πώς προστατεύεται η δημοσιογραφία.
Πώς εξασφαλίζεται ανεξάρτητη ενημέρωση στις ήδη επισφαλείς συνθήκες που εργάζονται οι δημοσιογράφοι.
Ως ρεπόρτερ και άνθρωπο του πεδίου, αυτό που με ανησυχεί είναι το να γίνει η δημοσιογραφία ακόμα πιο αγκιστρωμένη στο γραφείο, να χάσουμε τη δυνατότητα της φυσικής επαφής με τους ανθρώπους και τις ιστορίες τους και να μην μπορούμε να αξιοποιήσουμε και τις 5 αισθήσεις στην αφήγηση μιας ιστορίας.
Μια δημοσιογραφική έρευνα δεν μπορεί να βασιστεί μόνο σε τηλεφωνικές συνεντεύξεις. Χρειάζεται επιτόπια παρατήρηση και επαφή με πηγές.
Ποιο θα είναι το μέλλον της αργής δημοσιογραφίας σε ένα περιβάλλον φόβου και έντονων περιορισμών?
Είναι πολύ σημαντικό ο δημοσιογράφος εδώ στην Ελλάδα να ξαναβγεί στους δρόμους, έστω και κάτω από αυτές τις συνθήκες.
Η κρίση του κορονοϊού έφερε στην επιφάνεια ξανά ένα βασικό πρόβλημα της ελληνικής δημοσιογραφίας. Την έλλειψη εξειδικευμένων δημοσιογράφων, ανθρώπων που μπορούν να καταλάβουν επιστημονικά θέματα, να κατανοήσουν ιατρικούς όρους και να τους εκλαϊκεύσουν στο ευρύ κοινό.
Καλούμαστε τώρα με τον κορονοϊό να μιλήσουμε για πολύ συγκεκριμένα ιατρικά θέματα. Και υπάρχει πολύ μεγάλο πεδίο για λάθη που έχουν επιπτώσεις σε αυτούς που μας διαβάζουν και ακούνε.
Μου έκανε εντύπωση το πόσο γρήγορα μερικοί συνάδελφοι, από την τηλεόραση κυρίως, μπήκαν στον ρόλο του κατήγορου. Του ανθρώπου που μαλώνει, ακόμη και όταν τα μέτρα τηρούνταν σε μεγάλο βαθμό.
Αυτό που με προβληματίζει με τη δημοσιογραφία είναι ότι εξακολουθεί να μην αναπτύσσεται υγιώς και πάντα να υπερβάλλει.
Με ανησυχεί ότι αναλύουμε υπερβολικά τα στοιχεία της πανδημίας και δεν ασχολούμαστε με άλλες ειδήσεις, οικονομικές ή πολιτικές από την Ελλάδα και τον υπόλοιπο κόσμο.
Από την αρχή της πανδημίας στη χώρα μας, και ενώ το ιατρικό προσωπικό του ΕΣΥ φώναζε για τεράστιες ελλείψεις και ανετοιμότητα του συστήματος, η πλειοψηφία των ΜΜΕ το αγνοούσε. Το ίδιο έγινε και στην περίπτωση των vouchers Κόιλε Λυκίκου. Το να αγνοείς τόσο σοβαρά θέματα δείχνει πως η δημοσιογραφία στη χώρα μας σίγουρα περνάει κρίση.
Ένα σχόλιο.
What is your take on all this? 1, 2, 3 comments, up to you.
Ο δικός σας ματισμός ποιος είναι, θα ήθελα να ακούσουμε και αυτό.
Συγγνώμη, δεν άκουσα το ερώτημα.
Sorry, come again.
Πέρα από το σχόλιο,
Apart from the
ποιος είναι,
comment you want to formulate, and anything else? Troubokis. I think this is an opportunity for journalists to regain their credibility. It is important for people to resort to official sources, to real journalists, not to base the information on the social media. In Iran, 300 people died because of this phenomenon. In the US, people drink chlorine. I'm sorry. This is a huge opportunity for Greek journalism to regain, as I said, their credibility. Now, even more important is this. It is high time that we demand transparency about information and data. In the EU, all safeguards have been lifted, procurement is done over the phone. No, we need this data to be made public. It is our duty to demand transparency because coronavirus is about life or death, not just for us, for a whole generation. It is an opportunity for quality journalism to regain the forefront, and funds from the state and the government should support quality journalism, should support content, real quality content. Let's help journalists produce high quality content to inform people, because quality journalism is not cheap. Soufleri, but who will be the judge here? While Thanasis was speaking, I remembered an older discussion concerning funds for universities. I remember that funds were divided by 10 to 10 universities without any evaluation, without any assessment. The same money went to each and every university without any quality evaluation. We need evaluation, but do we have a political system that is ready to support this enhanced position? Do we have a government that will allocate resources on the basis of quality. It will be difficult, you know. Well, ideally, this should be the case. But are we ready? Is the government ready? Thanasi, I think, well, I'm reluctant to believe that the government and the state will do their homework. Developing a relationship of trust with our readers, this might be the solution. This might guarantee our survival in difficult periods, instead, that is, of depending on the state. I don't see any help coming to the real media, to the quality media. Someone had said in the past that the various sites just care about the clicks. No, we should not care about the click, but the clock. It takes time to produce quality. It takes time for someone to produce content, and it takes time for someone to read. There are better days ahead, but it won't be easy. Taloglu. 2 comments. First, the colleagues who raised the questions earlier are colleagues who were in the street all these days. They never stopped being on the front line all these days. And some of them, by the way, contracted the virus. So going out in the street to collect information is not easy. And many media are not aware of the real difficulties. Yes, that's so true. The media, the management of the media are not aware of the difficulties on the front line. But there is more. Ioanna will appreciate that. Tavernarakis was writing on Kathimerini to respond to a Nobel Prize, explaining why the virus was not produced in a lab. Invoking the genes, the genotype or part of the genotype of the virus, and this was printed on a daily newspaper. That was amazing. Well, most of the experts, you know, do not deal with the newspapers, with the daily newspapers. And by the way, Tavernarakis is one of the best genetic engineers we have in Greece. He is director at the Institute of Technology and Research in Crete. He's not just anyone. So it is good news that some of these eminent experts took the time to write for the media. And Crete TV had Pavlakis on the one day, and then Tavernarakis. This raises spectacularly the credibility of the media. This is quality journalism. When, that is, we engage with the scientists, the real experts. Ioanna, on science, you invited prominent scientists, and Tovim and Kathimerini invited prominent experts. But let's admit it, it was unusual that so many prominent experts came out on the media to explain to people what is happening. This is unprecedented in the last 35 years of my journalistic life. Soufleri. The Institute of Technology and Research in Crete has educated the population. There is a whole ecosystem of educated people in Crete. Young children, students are now educated. They know what they're talking about. Boustoukou. Well, there's so many questions around. Let me read this one. Accurate quality information in Britain. People go back to the BBC, The Guardian, The Times, etc. What is the trend in Greece? I think we answered that. There's the research we discussed earlier. All the material we discussed will be available, by the way, on our website. So apart from the debate per se, you will be able to find all the material we uploaded. We will make available the videos, the research, the presentations, the findings, whatever. All this will be available on our website. And there's another question through Facebook. Why the Radio TV Council, this independent authority, did not intervene immediately to protect the citizens from fake news by journalists? Fortunately, the citizens were more ready than we thought. Well, why did the Radio TV Council not intervene? Well, they only know that they are the only ones who can answer this. I don't think we can answer this question. We have only a few seconds. We have to wrap this up. Thanasis, as briefly as possible, please. Journalists showed self-sacrifice during the pandemic for their reports on TV, newspapers, etc. That was not journalism from home, so they deserve congratulations. Kudos to our journalists. I think Reuters came out with a big thank you to journalists. Well, this is the very nature of our work at the end of the day. We're not journalists, we're not desk journalists. Now, IMED is very prominent in dialogues. You are journalists, and today we have been discussing journalism, journalists, how they have handled the pandemic. We have been discussing what kind of pandemic this is in information terms. Let me say the following. For the time being, we are all at home, you know, but it's not just us. There's technical staff, the production company, the colleagues, the interpreters. For those who follow us in English, we are all at home for our safety. The question is that we should keep being able to ask questions, and this is what dialogues aim at. Not always provide the answers, but asking the right questions is important. We should remain alert at all times, and this is what we try to do at IMED. We, as journalists, mobilized. It is in our nature to ask questions. We contacted the people out there, those who cannot stay at home. The other thing is the vulnerable groups who cannot be exposed. So there are people who do the dirty work and who are exposed in these difficult times. So what we are doing today is to get in touch with as many journalists as possible, journalists, directors, photographer, etc. We have put together a lot of material, and this is not a campaign, it's not advertising. All this material will be made available. So I must thank those who have done the work, those who stay at home, those who go out. The question is about being present on the front line. We're all present. There are many who are present but not on the front line. And among the present ones are those who contracted the disease, those who died at the end of the day. Being present, therefore, is important. So we decided, that is IMED, a non-profit organization, IMED decided to make this content available to the transport media, the supermarkets, hospitals, not just in Greece, in Thessaloniki, in other cities, in Patra, in Volos, in Crete, and other cities will follow. You know, we only started today, so those who are already out there, or those who are ready to go out, check our material, check those present. Sneak peek of this content will follow, and as I said earlier, this is the result of the work of the many journalists who work in different media, with a different background, different course in life, with different experiences, different ideologies. But all these people work together to be present.
As you saw, and I'm sure that you will see them when you go out, so we see that, of course, we have the doctors in the hospitals. It's not just the doctors, it's also those in the kitchen, those that serve the trays to the people in hospital, the patients, people who clean from the municipality, people who collect the garbage from the municipality, people who work for delivery, because we know that there's been a lot of food delivered during the pandemic. We also have the bus drivers and also the traffic police, the pharmacists. You'll see people who actually are bakers. They work in bakeries so that we can get our fresh loaf of bread. People who work in the police. I don't think we've applauded them all. I don't think we've given them all a round of applause. We've applauded some of them, but at least we should try to remember who they are, because those working in the front line don't only come from one profession. Thank you very much for your presence in Dialogues. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you, Tassos Teloglou, Iana Soufleri, Thanasis Traboukis. We're tuned in order to listen to what you have to say next Tuesday. Tassos, you have research. We want to see the results. Iana, we watch what you have to say in Vima Science, and you give us a lot of information about current events. We're watching that closely. So let us listen to the people who have specialized knowledge. Thank you, Thanasi Trabouki, for coming, for being with us. We will listen to what's out there and or the information that comes our way. And let's hope that we have more scientific data available. And let's hope that this will be taken for granted in the future. We want to have good information. Of course, we always take things with a pinch of salt. This is something the word pinch of salt or doubt, that we should doubt the data and not always take everything at face value. So we will meet again. Always, there's a webcast. The next meeting will be on Wednesday, 13th of May at 6:30 in the afternoon. We'll be here waiting for you in order to talk about the economy. So we will all be present in one way or another. So we remain present. We bid you goodbye, and we will finish by showing you a video, a video that is of interest to us all. These are pictures that we see. These are people as well who offer their services and make our lives easier, or it can be us, meaning those of us who are already out there working in the front line. Thank you. Godspeed. See you 2 weeks from now. Thank you and have a nice evening.